Alright, I've been hinting at this video long enough. Let's finally talk about creating a state-supported passenger rail network here in Utah. If you are going to talk about passenger rail in Utah, your first stop should be the Utah Rail Passengers Association, a non-profit volunteer organization that works to promote expanded passenger rail in Utah. They have come up with this lambda-shaped network that makes the best use of our existing freight rail network. The UPRA has been a strong ally in pushing for the Rio Grande Plan, and I hope I can be as strong an ally in return. I recommend you go to their website, read up on their efforts, and maybe even become involved. The main problem that this network is intending to solve is the local connection. New Amtrak routes will be coming to Utah, perhaps within a decade, but these will be sticking mainly to the faster main lines. While these new services will be great for long-distance passengers, they will unfortunately bypass some key local destinations, such as Logan in the north, Moab in the southeast, and the Cedar City-St. George area in the southwest. What the Link Utah map proposes is to run at least 2 state-supported routes, based mainly on the future Amtrak routes, but that terminate at local destinations so that the benefits of rail investment can be enjoyed by all Utahns, not just those who live along the Wasatch Front. In total, 18 states already finance their own local Amtrak routes. Some are the more politically liberal states like Virginia and California, as you might expect, but others are more conservative, such as Oklahoma, Missouri, and North Carolina. Utah could very easily follow the model already set by these states without significant financial or political risk. If we did, in my opinion, the potential for success is very high, based on a few important factors. 1. Population density. The Wasatch Front contains between 80 to 90% of the state's population, an extraordinarily high ratio, and the corridor is already served by a proportionally excellent transit system. St. George in southwestern Utah are the second largest population center in the state, with 200,000 residents, but it is over 300 miles away, which is an uncomfortably long way to drive, but a comically short distance for a flight. Logan and Moab are smaller population centers, but each has their own disproportionately high travel demand due to Utah State University and Arches National Park. As the state continues to grow, as it is projected to do, we will need a greater diversity of transportation modes to connect these disparate regions reliably, regardless of traffic, weather, or season. 2. Limited roadway infrastructure. The freeways along the Wasatch Front are nearly built out, with no more room to expand, and yet they are still regularly clogged with traffic. Southern Utah has its own congestion issues, while both Logan and Moab were bypassed entirely by the freeway network, just as they were bypassed by the railroad main lines. To expand roadway access to these areas will come with significant costs, but the scope of these road improvements can be reduced if we switch some of that travel demand from cars to trains. To be more precise, the annual average daily traffic on I-15 through Salt Lake City is over 300,000 vehicles per day, the 20th highest of any freeway in the United States. If only 1% of these road trips were replaced by rail, the train would see over 1 million passengers annually, making it Amtrak's 6th highest used route, state-supported or not. And compare that with the current iteration of UTA's Frontrunner, which already captures over 5% of the corridor's travel demand, and will capture even more when its frequency is improved in about 5 years from now. 1% for an intercity passenger train is a very achievable goal. 3. Sunk costs. Because Amtrak will already be expanding routes across the state, track, signaling, and at-grade crossing upgrades are already going to be made along more than 90% of the route miles shown here on this map. Moreover, many new intermediary stations are going to have to be financed and built, even though under current plans, most of them will see only a once-daily long-distance train. Building an entire station for one train per day is pretty clearly an underutilization of assets. If we have the tracks and the stations, why not run more trains? 4. Demographics. Utah famously has one of the youngest populations in the country, which has translated to an above-average number of universities spread across the state. Tourists from around the world come to ski and explore our national parks, and the Sun Belt attracts a fair number of retirees. And all of these populations are statistically more likely to choose to travel by train. 5. Schedule and frequency. Amtrak's single route through Utah only stops here in the dead of night, which is inconvenient for everyone. The new routes will probably improve on this by running in the early morning or late evening, but those once daily departure times are still inconvenient for a vast majority of travelers. By running our own trains, we can run them on a schedule that works for Utahns. And, beyond running them when we want, we can also run as many trains as we want, which is a critical step in making train travel more appealing. Multiple state-supported routes around the country have proven that the highest driver of ridership, more than nicer amenities, better connections, or even faster travel times, is higher frequency. More trains, more often, with more choices, means more ridership. It really is as easy as that. However, despite all of these positive key indicators, rail service in Utah isn't necessarily a guaranteed success either. Utah has one of the fastest freeway speed limits in the nation, at 80 miles per hour. In other states with high passenger rail demand, the speed limits are set much lower. In Utah, both trains and cars have the same top speed of 80 miles per hour, removing the advantage trains could have had. Moreover, Utah is a very prosperous state, with an above-average rate of car ownership, meaning nearly every potential train rider already owns their own transportation alternative. If we want people to choose the train over their own cars, we absolutely have to ensure that travel times on the train are competitive with highway travel. This is one of the major reasons that our tracks and frontrunner lines are so well used along the Wasatch Front. Their high ridership per resident is almost directly correlated with their high average speed relative to comparable systems nationwide. There are only two ways to improve a train's average speed. We can either raise the top speed over long, uninterrupted stretches, or we can cut out unnecessary stops and bottlenecks. While top speeds are more attention-grabbing, removing bottlenecks is often more effective. For example, Amtrak's most popular service, the Northeast Regional, has a top speed of 125 miles per hour, making it the second fastest train in the Americas, tied with Brightline in Florida. However, the train's average speed is only 54 miles per hour between Boston and New York, and 58 miles per hour between New York and Washington, D.C. Too many station stops, along with multiple slow zones caused by old infrastructure, combine to keep the train at about the same average speed as its road and air competitors. Meanwhile, the fastest train in the Americas, the Acela Express, runs the same route at a top speed 25 miles per hour faster, but averages only about 10 miles per hour faster, at 64 and 77 miles per hour respectively. Here in Utah, we already have our own comparatively fast train. The California Zephyr between Salt Lake City and Reno, Nevada, averages 60 miles per hour, or 2 miles per hour faster than the Northeast Regionals. The enormous distances between our cities and our relatively flat and spacious desert valleys allow the Zephyr to reach its maximum speed of 79.9 miles per hour and hold steady for extended periods of time. Other states weren't as lucky and had to build their way into competitive travel times, such as Michigan, which raised speeds on their Wolverine route between Chicago and Detroit to 110 miles per hour on state-owned tracks, allowing for an average speed of up to 52 miles per hour. Illinois worked with the Union Pacific Railroad to upgrade its tracks, signal, and grade crossings to raise its top speed from 80 miles per hour to 110 miles per hour, and raised its average speed from 47 to 57 miles per hour on trips between Chicago and St. Louis. I bring up these speeds of 110 miles per hour because, once upon a time, we used to have trains running that fast and faster here in Utah. This Union Pacific FEF, on display in Ogden at the Utah State Railroad Museum, has wheels nearly 6 feet in diameter. It was designed to go at speeds of 110 miles per hour, and some accounts say it got as fast as 120 miles per hour in regular service. At the time, there were no speed limits for trains, and no speedometers in locomotive cabs. Everything was done based on mile markers and the judgment of the train crew. With better measurements and record keeping, it's possible that trains like these could have been proven the fastest in the world. But that's a story for another video. For this video, I've calculated 2 sets of travel times. The first is based on the existing top speed of 80 miles per hour, which would produce an average speed of about 60 miles per hour, which, as I said, is already very fast for passenger trains in this country. But in order to be competitive with cars, I'm also going to imagine a future with tracks upgraded to the historic speed of 110 miles per hour, which would produce an average speed of about 80 miles per hour. I arrived at that number by matching the current average speed of Brightline, Florida, between Orlando and Miami, with an average speed of 79 miles per hour. That is the true fastest train in the Americas, based on average speed. To achieve those speeds, I'm imagining using a Utah-specific fleet of Aero train sets, similar to the Cascade train sets about to go into service next year, but with fewer coaches and perhaps a baggage car for bikes and such. Because these are the same cars that Brightline uses, I am showing one door for each car using stairs for low-block platforms, while the other has level boarding with a gap filler for high-block platforms along mainline freight lines. That way, cities that want to invest in their passenger rail stations and add convenience to local passengers may build high-block platforms, but cities that aren't able to spend even that much money can still be guaranteed passenger rail service. Alright, that's more than enough setup for one video. Let's spend the remainder of this video talking about the combined section between Provo and Logan, a segment I'm going to dub the Wasatch Corridor. I'll cover the other two branches in future videos. So, let the tour begin! The center of our statewide passenger rail network is Provo. The track plan through the city may look simple, but the close proximity of the rail yards will complicate things. Provo was originally laid out along what is now 500 West, which is why State Street, Pioneer Park, City Hall, and this ideal railroad access point are all located where they are. However, soon after the railroad arrived, the social and economic center of the city, and eventually the entire street grid, shifted eastward to Academy Avenue. The location of Provo Union Station tried to split the difference, and ended up in a quiet residential neighborhood. Starved for passengers, it was eventually torn down in 1983. While the Amtrak platform is still there, UTA's frontrunner established a new station location just below University Avenue, 2 blocks to the east. Ideally, our new passenger station would be built at this new, busier location. However, there is not a lot of room there for an entire new station to be developed. By moving the crossovers to the west and cutting back the yard leads for the former Utah Southern route to the east, it should be possible to wedge in an island platform between the two mainline tracks, with similar dimensions to the parallel UTA station. The ticketing, waiting, and other hospitality areas would need to be built above the tracks, similar to a Brightline, Florida station, which could have the added benefit of connecting directly into the transit station's new pedestrian bridge. But all of this would come at a cost. Like so much of what I'm proposing in this video, there are ways to start running trains today, using just the infrastructure we already have. These other upgrades can come later, in due time, once demand for passenger rail service has successfully proven itself. Speaking of upgrades, you will notice, as we head north from Provo, that I've highlighted our route in multiple colors, based on potential top speeds, which are projected onto the ground near each curve. Yellow shows the current top speed of 80 miles per hour, while green areas go from 100 up to 125 miles per hour, depending on the radius of the curve. As I said before, a top speed of 110 miles per hour is required to achieve the eventual average speed of 80 miles per hour. 110 miles per hour is also the fastest top speed allowed on tracks that have at-grade railroad crossings, which are, unfortunately, all too common along the Wasatch Front. Between Provo and Logan, we will pass through 85 public crossings and dozens of private crossings, for an average of about 1 crossing per mile. Here at Vineyard, the double track we have enjoyed since downtown Provo comes to an end, and we are left with 26 miles of single track before picking up double track again in Midvale. This single track is broken up by 3 sidings, located in American Fork, Lehigh, and Draper. The section of track between Provo and Salt Lake City is called the Provo Subdivision, and aside from the once daily Amtrak and BNSF trains, one in each way, it is not commonly used as a through route. Space has been preserved for a second track along the entire subdivision, but for now, there isn't enough traffic demand to justify the cost. These S-curves through Old Town Lehigh are a major slow zone, but there is unfortunately very little we can do to improve the geometry here, at least not without demolishing a straighter path through multiple neighborhoods of historic homes. However, we will soon be coming up to the Jordan River Narrows, where there is currently another S-curve that can be straightened, this time by digging through a hill that is already partially excavated. Going straight through will raise speeds there from 50 miles per hour to 85 miles per hour. Entering the Salt Lake Valley, we zoom past the redevelopment area known as The Point without stopping. To keep our speeds high and travel times low, our intercity trains will stop only at the most important city centers. Transfers to Frontrunner Commuter Rail will be available at Brigham City, Ogden, Salt Lake City, Provo, and Santa Quin. In essence, these statewide trains can act as express trains, relieving Frontrunner of some of its long-distance demands and allowing it to keep its orderly clock-face schedule. Even though there is a definite demand for faster rail service along the Wasatch Front, I have serious reservations about introducing multiple stop patterns to Frontrunner. By running both commuter and statewide trains in the same corridor, the Wasatch Front will be able to accommodate any kind of potential passenger. As we pass South Jordan and the Frontrunner flyover, it is interesting to note how UTA's commuter trains complete the Provo to Salt Lake City segment in just over 1 hour. Amtrak currently gives its trains up to 73 minutes to traverse the same segment, even though there are no intermediary stops and the top speeds are the same. Interference from freight trains and slow zones in downtown Salt Lake City are a slow combination. In the far future, it may be necessary to fill in those 26 miles of single track with a full double track. At 44 miles, it should be possible to get from Provo to Salt Lake City in 45 minutes at an average speed of 60 miles per hour, or in a mere 33 minutes at 80 miles per hour. We are now approaching the south side of Roper Yard, which is one of the busiest freight rail yards in the state, second only to Ogden. I've talked before about the potential passenger-only track for the Rio Grande Plan and how it ought to be extended south past Roper Yard. This is the spot where it should begin. Reaching Salt Lake City, we take the new route through the city into the Rio Grande Plan train box. Salt Lake City is the cultural, economic, historic, and political capital of the state of Utah. The Rio Grande Depot will be the beating heart through which all intercity passenger trains must pass. Without a successful and integrated train station in downtown Salt Lake City, our interstate passenger rail network will not draw effective ridership. The Rio Grande Plan is key not only to improving rail transit into Salt Lake City, but for making the entire statewide rail network feasible. Leaving the Rio Grande train box, I imagine that the passenger-only track will continue around the east end of the North Yard, following the new Frontrunner alignment past the west side of the old diesel shops. That change alone will raise the speeds here from 45 to over 60 miles per hour as the trains accelerate towards Ogden. The line between Salt Lake City and Ogden is called the Ogden Subdivision, and unlike the Provo Subdivision, this stretch of track is very heavily used by through trains of all varieties. All of Union Pacific's mainline traffic from the overland route down to Southern California, as well as half the trains bound for the San Francisco Bay Area, run over these tracks. As such, the line is fully double-tracked, though it does lack in crossovers. Crossovers are where trains can switch from one track to another, and the more of them you have, the more flexible your railroad operations can be, allowing faster trains to get around slower ones, sort of like passing zones on a two-lane highway. For routes that share freight and passengers, it is standard to have a crossover every 5 to 10 miles. Between Salt Lake City and Ogden, the average distance between crossovers is at the upper end, at about 10 miles between crossovers. Imagine being stuck on the highway behind a slow-moving truck and not being able to pass it for 10 miles. As rail traffic, both freight and passenger, continues to grow along this corridor, it isn't unreasonable to project that one day, even frequent crossovers may not be enough, and that eventually a third track will become necessary. The good news is that there is already sufficient space for a third track along the entire length of this subdivision. The bad news is that it will still be expensive. Thankfully, as always, such an upgrade is not a necessity at this present time. Passenger trains can, and sometimes do already operate over this segment without any issues. I bring up the issue of a third track only because, with a very few exceptions, the Ogden subdivision appears to be made for higher speeds. With gentle grades and curves, the route can very easily accommodate passenger trains at or above 100 miles per hour, just as was done in the 1930s and 40s. At 36 miles, travel times between Salt Lake City and Ogden would be 36 minutes at 60 miles per hour or 27 minutes at 80 miles per hour. Ogden is a critical railroad junction in the Union Pacific network, and with the potential for more long-distance trains in the near-ish future, Ogden could become a hub for passengers as well, with trains heading out in all four directions. With high potential comes high complications. So many that I already made a video about what to do about a passenger station in Ogden. Long story short, I anticipate the need for new platforms built on a skew beside the historic Union Station building, and new passenger-only tracks to connect them to the main lines, including the alignment we are following now, parallel to the existing UTA flyover. Now that we're in Ogden, let's check our travel times. In total, we've covered 80 miles, which will take either 1 hour and 20 minutes to complete at 60 miles per hour, or exactly 60 minutes at 80 miles per hour average speed. Compare that to the current frontrunner travel times of just under 2 hours. North of Ogden, we leave the Salt Lake subdivision and enter the Ogden subdivision. Here, we are free from the congestion of heavy freight traffic, since this line sees only a handful of trains per day. But we also lose the benefit of a second track. Of the 20 miles between Ogden and Brigham City, 15 and a half of them consist of only one track, with the remainder being split up between 3 major sidings. Travel times would be about 20 minutes at an average speed of 60 miles per hour, or 15 minutes at an average speed of 80 miles per hour. These 5 minutes may not appear worth the effort of upgrading the track. However, with only one track, that would be the difference between running 3 trains per hour and 4. A fact that is often lost on American high-speed rail enthusiasts is that, worldwide, the main incentive for higher speeds is not faster travel times, which are arbitrary. Instead, the main driver is higher system capacity, which is definitionally material. The Ogden subdivision began life in the 1870s as the narrow-gauge Utah Northern Railroad. As such, it is a mix of long straight tangents and the occasional sharp curve, but nothing that can't be addressed within the current right-of-way widths. You'll notice that whenever we pass one of these 80-mile-per-hour curves, I've also drawn in a curve for 110 miles per hour or faster, just to show how minimal the difference really would be. This includes space for UTA's future expansion of Frontrunner up to Brigham City, which is coming up in the view right now. Brigham City is home to a beautiful historic train depot built by the Oregon Short Line in 1907, and which last saw passenger service in 1971. A brief attempt to revive the station site for Amtrak service in the late 1970s was quickly abandoned due to low ridership, but that was 45 years ago, nearly half a century. While it is tempting to restore this building to rail service as is, there is a critical flaw to consider, which is the building's location. The rail yard in Brigham City is not near the population center, and there is little potential for transit-oriented development. Worst of all, the road to the depot will soon be replaced by a new highway bridge, making it difficult to access and hiding the depot from sight. In all of UTA's planning documents, The Brigham City Frontrunner Terminal is shown to be a half-mile to the south, near Box Elder High School, or perhaps even near Brigham City Community Hospital, where the potential for transit-oriented development is much higher, and the infrastructure costs for the Frontrunner terminus are lower. If the citizens of Brigham City love their historic depot, they ought to consider moving it to the new transit center site. Barring that, I have Brigham City slated for a modern station building, and the historic depot being moved to Ogden as part of the State Railroad Museum's train rides beside the Weber River. It was even labeled in the Ogden Union Station video, and none of you commented on it. North of Brigham City, the next stop will be Cache Junction, 28 miles away. Like the Ogden to Brigham City section, the line is mostly single track, with the exception, once again, of 3 sidings. Also like the Brigham City section, the tracks are almost entirely straight and flat, and perfect for fast passenger trains, assuming the occasional reconstructed curve. To return to an earlier topic, top speeds are not only important for travel times, but also for clearing the line more quickly, allowing for more trains to pass through. And, as mentioned at the beginning, higher train frequency is key to making train travel attractive to the general public. The bare minimum number of departures per day to be considered all-day service is typically 3 round trips per day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 1 in the evening. Since the Provo to Logan segment will serve both routes to Moab and Cedar City, there will hopefully be at least 6 round trips per day on this line, happening in 3 peak hours. This may seem like high expectations for a route that currently has no round trips per day, but consider that, between the 3 major bus companies in this area, Salt Lake Express, Greyhound, and Flixbus, there are already around a dozen round trips per day between Salt Lake City and Logan, with the cheapest tickets costing around $50 one way. If that isn't built-up demand, I don't know what is. As we reach the northern end of the Bear River Valley, we encounter our first major slow zone since Old Town Lehi in Utah County, as the tracks lean into the short but jagged Cutler Canyon. Though the track geometry is laid out to allow speeds potentially as high as 35 miles per hour, the actual speed limit is currently a mere 12 miles per hour, based on the steel bridges that carry the tracks parallel to the cliff faces. There has been a lot of discussion from passenger rail enthusiasts about bypassing Cutler Canyon with a massive set of tunnels, or perhaps by using the old Utah and Idaho interurban grade, parallel to State Route 30. My personal preference is generally towards infrastructure improvements and higher speeds. However, I will grant Cutler Canyon an exemption for the sake of beauty. Trains running through beautiful places are an attraction all on their own, and the Cutler Canyon section is not long enough to add significant delays to the regular schedule, especially if speeds can be raised to 35 miles per hour eventually. I will add a 10-minute penalty to both travel times, making the 60 mile per hour option 38 minutes and the 80 mile per hour option 31 minutes. Cache Junction is where the Union Pacific Main Line north to Pocatello splits from the Cache Valley branch to Logan. There is no station building there now, but the failed Amtrak from Brigham City stood here for many years to serve the original Amtrak Pioneer, since this was its closest point to the city of Logan. The upcoming long-distance trains will almost certainly operate the same way, and if that is indeed the case, I suppose our state-supported trains can stop here too, though perhaps only if requested through an app. And if trains are going to stop here, let's also stop for a moment to review our travel times so far. The final section, from Cache Junction to Logan, will be the most interesting of this video. 100 years ago, multiple rail lines traversed the valley towards Logan, but today, the only tracks that remain make a long loop around the perimeter of the valley, where the agricultural traffic is. The old Oregon Shortline Depot still exists as a restaurant, but it is surrounded by a residential neighborhood with only minimal opportunity for future transit-oriented development. Logan's main transit hub is located over a mile away from the depot and is inaccessible by rail. Furthermore, the old right-of-way leading straight across the valley to the depot has been built over by multiple warehouses, government buildings, and housing developments. clawing that right-of-way back and demolishing all that new construction would be practically unfeasible, to say the least. Once you lose a right-of-way, you generally do not get it back. All of this is to say that finding an appropriate end of line in Logan will be a major challenge that could make or break the entire project. My proposal should in no way be seen as final. As always, I will defer to the residents of Logan to determine where they want their station to be. That said, my suggestion for a terminal in Logan is the Logan Cache Airport. While this airport is only just beginning to grow into a commercial airport, the potential is there to pool together resources for 3 modes of transportation so that airplanes, buses, and trains can all have an attractive, shared passenger facility. By combining these modes and their riders together, the transit connection to Logan's urban center and to Utah State University could be built to a much higher standard. The airport is already adjacent to the existing railroad tracks, so perhaps the connection to downtown could eventually be made by a new rail transit line. Or perhaps a future extension of the state-supported passenger trains could end up at the historic depot anyway. Again, I will leave it to the residents of Logan to decide. To reach the Logan Cache Airport, the existing branch line would need major upgrades as far as the Benson Marina, at which point a new line would need to be laid out for 6 miles across agricultural land before reaching the terminal. In short, this will require 6.5 miles of new track and 3 miles of upgraded branch line. While this is a significant distance to lay out new track, the lack of major population or geographic obstacles should help keep costs relatively low. Since leaving Provo, we have covered 141.25 miles of track, with all but the last 6.5 already built. Aside from those final miles, this entire line could begin operation today, using temporary platforms at the station sites until permanent facilities are constructed. At 60 miles per hour average speed, plus our 10 minutes for Cutler Canyon, a trip from Provo to Logan would take 2 hours, 28 minutes, or 1 hour, 45 minutes from Salt Lake City to Logan. Compare this to the travel time on I-15, which is 1 hour, 21 minutes without traffic, using a route that is 13 miles shorter. A mere 24-minute difference means that the train is already an attractive alternative, considering all the onboard amenities. However, at 80 miles per hour average speed, the trip from Provo to Logan would take only 1 hour and 54 minutes, while Salt Lake City to Logan would take a mere 1 hour and 21 minutes, matching the car exactly, assuming no traffic or weather on I-15. Funny how that worked out. I hope I have demonstrated that a passenger train along the Wasatch Corridor and up to Logan is a feasible and realistic goal. As our state continues to grow in population and congestion, this is a very real solution that ought to be taken more seriously by our leaders. Please be sure to leave your opinions and your ideas for improvements down in the comments below, and stay tuned for future videos for trains to Moab, Cedar City, and beyond. I'm Christian Lenhart. Thank you for watching.